Meeting number 74, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23, 2022. Before we proceed, I would like to remind everyone to address all comments through the Chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and a motion adopted on Monday, May 1st, 2023, the Committee is resuming its study of the allocation of resources to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. I would like to welcome our witnesses representing the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development. We have Mr. Niall Cronin, Executive Director, United States Transboundary Affairs, and we have Ms. Felicia Minotti, Deputy Director, United States Transboundary Affairs. Thank you for taking the time to appear. You will have up to 5 minutes to make an opening statement before we go into questions. So when you're ready, please, 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. My name is Niall Cronin. Since September 2022, I have been Executive Director of the U.S. Transboundary Affairs Division at Global Affairs Canada. I'm joined today by Felicia Minotti, who is a Deputy Director in the same division. Avant de poursuivre, j'aimerais commencer par rappeler que le territoire...
I would like to mention that we are meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people, Anishinaabe.
The division where Felicia and I work provides a broad range of analysis and advice to Global Affairs senior officials and ministers, as well as to other federal departments on border, energy, water, and environmental issues affecting Canada's bilateral relations with the United States. This includes subjects such as climate change, fossil fuels, water quality and quantity issues, fisheries, as well as Canada's engagement with the International Joint Commission. Our division also provides advocacy support to Canada's diplomatic network in the United States on energy and environmental issues. Part of our work includes tracking the activities of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission and any issues that might arise. We have regular contacts with the GLFC Secretariat, colleagues at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and U.S. counterparts, both directly and through Canada's mission network in the United States. Felicia et moi-même avons discuté des questions actuelles.
Felicia and myself have discussed these issues with our counterparts from the American Embassy in Ottawa, as well as from the Secretary of State in Washington. We have the support of our group within Fisheries and Oceans to facilitate communications with the Americans and with the Commission as needed.
Understand that on April 25th, 2023, the Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer for DFO provided the Commission with updated financial information outlining Canada's contribution to the GLFC activities, which is consistent with Canada's Budget 2022 commitment. From our perspective, this is very welcome news. Canada takes seriously our obligations to bilateral and multilateral organizations. In addition, we are aware that a number of stakeholders are advocating for a governance change from DFO to Global Affairs. We have assured our U.S. counterparts that regardless of the locus of governance within the Canadian government, Canada takes seriously its obligations under the 1954 Convention on Great Lakes Fisheries. Unless and until there is a decision to move responsibility for the GLFC from DFO, we continue to operate under that current construct. Je tiens à souligner.
I would also like to point out that other departments, other than this one, direct the government's activities at the bilateral and multilateral level. Regardless of the department responsible, they consult with the government as a whole, and what is said in these fora is on behalf of the Government of Canada. This coordination is particularly important with respect to Canada's relationship with the United States.
Relationship with the United States is of primordial importance. As President Biden said in his March 2023 address to Parliament, no two nations on earth are bound by such close ties: friendship, family, commerce, and culture. The President's in-person visit and the joint statement from the President and Prime Minister confirmed that our two nations stand united in this moment, finding solutions side by side. Bilateral institutions like the GLFC are valuable mechanisms that enable our two countries to find solutions on such important issues. With that, we'd be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. A little bit under time. That'll bode well for the question part of it. I will now go to Mr. Arnold for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today on this important issue. I appreciate your opening comments here. I'm going to go back to what we heard last week from officials with the Department of Fisheries, stating that the issue has been raised to the highest levels of government. We can only take that as meaning it would be the Privy Council Office, Cabinet, or the PMO, because it's no longer apparently, or according to him, no longer within the Department of Fisheries. Can you tell us if you are aware of what level it's been taken to at the government level?
Mr. Chair, our understanding is that any questions relating to machinery of government, or any decisions, rather, relating to machinery of government changes rest with the PMO. And so I think what our colleagues from Department of Fisheries and Oceans said last week was that analysis has been undertaken across government, and that decision now rests at the center, which we would call Privy Council Office, Prime Minister's Office.
Okay, thank you. So it's at the Privy Council Office or the PMO level. Was your department consulted before it was raised to this highest level?
Mr. Chair, as I said in my opening statement, we are in regular touch with officials at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and so yes, we are consulted as this the process around this issue winds its way through government.
Okay, if you've been regularly consulted, have you been made aware of any issues with changing the machinery of government, or are there any problems that have been pointed out with that?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't say that there are problems. I think it's more a question of how these decisions are taken and informed. And like our colleagues at Department of Fisheries and Oceans, what we've certainly said is we take a very practical approach to governance of the GLFC. And until and unless there's a decision to change, we're operating under the current construct. And we found that there are a number of models for how Canada manages its relationships with bilateral and multilateral organizations, and we do the best with the model that we have. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to be turning the rest of my time over to Mr. Epp.
Thank you. The Commission contends that the DFO is in a structural conflict of interest position by appointing their commissioners and being a contracted party of the Commission. Have you seen the FASN legal opinion the Commission procured, has made aware to all the parties? Can you comment? Do you disagree with the legal opinion expressed?
Mr. Chair, we do not agree with the legal opinion that there is a conflict of interest. I think, as our colleagues from Department of Fisheries and Oceans stated last week, and I think what we find very encouraging on this file is that everyone's working in the same direction. Everyone recognizes the importance of the Commission. Everyone values the work that they do. And so everyone's working to make sure that that work can continue and get back on track.
Thank you. As I asked the Commission, can you table a legal opinion with the committee for a report that disputes the FASN Commission?
With respect, I will have to take that back and check to see what can be shared.
Thanks. Are bureaucrats ever correct in superseding provisions of a treaty in the international agreements?
No, I think what bureaucrats are charged with doing is finding effective ways to implement the various provisions in a treaty.
So if that were to occur, and even outside of our Canada-U.S. relationship, you rightly pointed out how close that is and how many other kind of treaties we have with that, what would happen? What would be the reaction you would expect from foreign governments if the representatives at the tables, legs basically were cut out by bureaucrats. What would the reaction from other nations be?
Mr. Chair, it's difficult for me to answer a hypothetical. I think what I can say is Canada certainly takes its treaty obligations seriously, and as bureaucrats, we're charged with advising the government and ensuring that the obligations Canada has undertaken are indeed met.
If that's the case, then why, in your opinion, are the Americans not at the table on the Great Lakes Fishery Commission?
Mr. Chair, it's difficult for me to speak on behalf of the American commissioners. I think the message we've passed to our counterparts here at the U.S. Embassy and at the Department of State is, again, Global Affairs are quite pleased that the funding issues have been sorted. We think we heard that from the Chief Financial Officer last week. I think what the message we're sending is we encourage people to get at the table.
One more question in. Does the GLFC have the authority under the treaty to contract with another party other than the DFO for sea lamprey control?
I believe it does, yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ripp. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, my question. Mr. Cronin, could you expand a bit more to the committee why you stated you agreed there is not a conflict of interest with DFO administering the current funding agreement with the Great Lakes Commission?
Mr. Chair, I think I would echo some of the comments from my colleagues last week, that the interests of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission and the Government of Canada are very much aligned. Both recognize the importance of the Commission's work. I think there was a decision in the late 1970s that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans would be responsible for the Commission. And so funding has...
Challenge since 1970? Has there ever been a challenge to the agreement between DFO and the Great Lakes Commission since 1970?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think the reason we're here today is there's been continuing discussions around the benefits and the pros and cons of that decision.
Sorry?
My question was, has there ever been a challenge, an exterior challenge to the exterior from government, within government, to the agreement between DFO, as you articulated, which began in 1970 and today?
Other than the discussions that are taking place over the last few years, I'm not aware of a particular challenge.
If you could check and actually confirm to the committee if there was. Could you briefly talk about, you referenced a number of models that GAC administers, and what's different about those versus the Great Lakes Commission? If you could briefly just comment.
Certainly. So I can speak to three that our division tracks closely: the International Joint Commission, the Roosevelt Campobello International Park, and then the International Boundary Commission. So, Mr.
Those would overlap or even in any way deal with fishery items, would they?
No. International Joint Commission deals with water levels and water quality.
Those three are working well. Could you give an opinion, if you can, to the committee? What's not working with the current Great Lakes Commission and DFO? We heard a lot of hostility, I shall use, between, as expressed by the Great Lakes Commission, and the way it is being, some would say, micromanaged by DFO. So, in your opinion, responsibility for dealing with a number of others, what is occurring in that relationship and that agreement that that is not happening in others, and maybe leading to that significant difference of opinion.
I think if I could, Mr. Chair, I would reflect on last week's appearance, both by representatives of Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as well as the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. I think what we heard was certainly a good faith effort on both parties' behalf to get things back on track, a recognition that there have been challenges in the relationship, but that there is a real willingness and a commitment from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to make sure that those relationships are repaired, that standard operating procedures are put in place, and that it's clear to all sides the roles and responsibilities of the other.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, in the time I have left, Mr. Crinlin, you referenced that Global Affairs is pleased that funding issues have been resolved. So I take it then you're aware of that a lot of the issues that was raised by the Commission before this committee are no longer so, that everything has been resolved. Is that what you're testifying to this committee?
Well, I think there is Mr. Chair, I think there is a difference of opinion on how there are different views on the machinery of government for the GLFC. I think with respect as an official, our role certainly is to work with the construct as it's set. What we watch very closely from Global Affairs Canada is views of our American colleagues on the Commission, and certainly up until Budget 2022, the funding had been raised on a fairly regular basis. And so with the clarifications that have taken place subsequent to the funding announcement, I think that has certainly helped in our conversations with our U.S. colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here this morning. There's something I'd like to understand. The direct relationship between GAC and the Commission. What is the basic relationship there?
So I think, I think our relationship is one, we recognize the importance of the Commission. We certainly recognize the role that it plays in supporting the Great Lakes fishery. And so that is why we're in touch with officials at the Secretariat, either, informally, at, at events we'll speak. We'll also have regular calls, check-ins, just to make sure that the Commission is healthy and functioning, and really supporting that strong Canada-U.S. relationship that we have.
Okay. Okay. Your colleagues last week confirmed that there was no discrimination as to nationality when there's an issue of selling a fishing company. Does your department do anything to ensure retention of these companies among the hands of Quebecers or Canadian owners? Do you have any effect on that retention aspect?
I think that would be, with respect, that would be outside of the responsibilities of the division where I sit in global affairs. I think our role is much more to monitor the state of the relationship with the U.S. on various transboundary issues, including water issues. When it comes to sort of private sector and the role of companies, I would have to take that back and see which departments or parts of our own department might be better placed to answer.
When you say that you're monitoring the relationship, what do you do if you notice that while you're monitoring, there's a problem?
To do is to assess the reasons for the problem, so that we do that through talking to as many people as possible. And then we see if there's a way that we can resolve through discussion at our level. If that is unsuccessful, then seeing what tools Global Affairs can bring to the table to help resolve the issue.
So tell me, in this desire to ensure monitoring and vigilance, we've heard from witnesses here, and I always get back to it. I was really struck or shocked by it. Some witnesses had to testify anonymously. Other witnesses came and told us, putting aside the commission, but I think the study is important for the St. Lawrence River and Gulf of the St. Lawrence fishers, but it's directly related to the Great Lakes anyways. Of course, it all is connected. We've heard owners say that they were victims of a lack of vigilance on the part of the FO, the government, GAC. We don't really know whom, but we're trying to clarify. And they lost their permit, their quota, their potential for fishing, the monetary benefit that fishing could provide. It's troubling because if you just let the system to its own devices, you're talking about, you use the word machinery. I like the word machinery. It's like, you have all these circuits within it. It feels like that's what it is. How would you, at your level, protect or be able to protect the owners, these fishers who have quotas that do this from one generation to the next modestly, and all of a sudden, because of some reason, they lose their quota and their permit. They can't even keep their boat afloat. So how do we keep this fishing potential in Quebec and in Canada? Are you in position to intervene on that? Say something to that?
I think what I would say absolutely is, the Department of Global Affairs has a role in defending Canadian interests and explaining Canadian interests to our American colleagues. I think if there were specific details, I could certainly take that back and look at what instruments and tools we have at our disposal, and certainly consult with colleagues at Department of Fisheries and Oceans to find a way forward.
These people must have made representations or spoken to DFO and tried several things that haven't panned out. At this point, you've got GAC. Does that mean GAC is kind of the sentinel in a way? There's this arrival from the outside and what's happening on the inside with the fishing industry. Would you be able to have more power to get involved, intervene? Would you like more power? I know that I have only 10 seconds.
I think that's something I would have to take back because it is outside of the scope of our division.
Could you do this in writing?
I think what would be helpful, Mr. Chair, if we can clarify the question, and I can certainly respond to that in writing. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Debian. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses here today. My first question, Mr. Cronin, I wanted to dig a little bit more through you, Chair, to Mr. Cronin. I wanted to dig a little bit further into the questions around conflict of interest. I'm wondering if you have any written documentation specific to your opinion that there is no conflict of interest.
As I mentioned before, Mr. Chair, I can take that question back and see what written documentation can be provided to the committee.
Have you, through the chair, Mr. Cronin, seen the legal opinion that was provided to the Great Lakes Fishery Commission on June 24th, 2022?
Yes, I do believe I have a copy.
Okay. Thank you. Further to your comment that you don't agree that there is a conflict of interest, have you seen the specific information in this legal opinion that states there exists a basic conflict because DFO is a contracted service provider to the Commission. Second, because the Commission's budget ultimately comes out of DFO's budget, the funding of Commission operations and programs conflicts with the funding of other DFO operations and programs. Based on this clear legal opinion that there is a conflict of interest, what is the basis of your statement that there is not a conflict of interest?
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, I would go back to the comments from our colleagues at Fisheries and Oceans provided to the committee last week, that because our interests are aligned in delivery of the Fishery Commission's mandate, that there is no conflict. But I do understand that there are difference of opinions. The opinion provided by our lawyers is different, and that's why I committed to going back to the department to see what could be shared in writing with this committee.
Thank you, through the chair, Mr. Cronin. To clarify then, you are in disagreement with the legal opinion that has been provided to us as testimony by the Great Lakes Fishery Commission.
Correct. That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. My next question was around your comments around, Mr. Cronin, through the chair, around funding issues have been sorted. Mr. Baker, who was here in a previous meeting, clearly articulated in his opening statement just a little glimmer of some of the information that he spoke to. But he was saying that in November 22, not only had Parliament's 2022 funding not been provided, but the full Canadian appropriation for 2023 was not available either. Some 8 months following Parliament's commitment to fully fund the Commission, Worst DFO then communicated its intent to withhold from Parliament's allocation. It goes on from there. Would you say, Mr. Cronin, through the chair, that this would be an example of the funding being sorted?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I would go back to my opening statement and the reference to the letter from the Chief Financial Officer at Department of Fisheries Oceans that was sent in April that I think went some way to resolve the issue of funding and making it clear that funds would be transferred and that there's a stable path forward for the future based on Budget 2022 commitments.
Thank you. Through you as well, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cronin, can you clarify what you meant when you said, I quote, do the best with the model that you have? What does that look like, do the best with the model you have, and what do you see as the challenges of the model that's currently in place?
So I think, Mr. Chair, I would go back to the point that machinery of government decisions are made outside of any one department. And so the decision, the current construct is that Department of Fisheries and Oceans is responsible for the GLFC. And so Global Affairs is working with that model. And what that means is we're in communications with Department of Fisheries and Oceans officials, as well as with the Great Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Cronin. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. I appreciate, through the chair, I just want to get to the crux of my question. I understand that the decision-making capacity is not yours to make. However, you do have experience within. Could you please speak to the challenges that you see within the existing systems?
So I think what I would say, Mr. Chair, to that question is there are a number of different models. Not all international organizations are the relationship with international organizations or bilateral institutions. Not all of them are managed by Global Affairs. I think what we've seen in some of the regional fishery organizations and some of the bilateral fishery commissions that we have with the United States, those relationships are managed quite successfully by Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And I think what will be of value is the committee's findings will help us understand more what's at the heart of this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Cronin. When Mr. Baker was here, I believe it was Mr. Bacon, he had said there was discussion around the Commission's portfolio management duties being moved from DFO to Global Affairs and that it should mirror the successful and proven U.S. structure currently in place. What are your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, I think as I understand it, in the United States, the Department of State is responsible for the U.S. relationship with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. I don't have a comment on the U.S. system. That is very much their business to decide how things are run. I would note, in the same way that not all international organizations or bilateral institutions are managed by Global Affairs in Canada, not all of them are managed by Department of State. So, for example, in Canada, Global Affairs is responsible for the relationship with the Roosevelt Campobello Park, but my understanding is that on the United States side, the responsibility for that relationship is managed by Department of Interior and the National Park Service. So really, there are a number of different models. There's a number of different ways to manage a successful relationship with a bilateral institution.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Small for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming out today. And I'm looking forward to working with you folks in Global Affairs in the next few years as we break down some trade barriers for our pinniped products. I'm expecting great support from your department. My question is going to be to Ms. Minotti, since we haven't heard from you today, and I'm sure you've got some valuable input. Ms. Minotti, in April of 2021, a letter was signed by 18 MPs and sent to the Minister of Foreign Affairs requesting a change in Canadian leadership from DFO to GAC. In May of that year, various stakeholders made the exact same request. What discussions took place between DFO and GAC as a result of those requests for a change in leadership?
Thank you. April 2021 and May 2021, just recalling the dates. To be honest, it was some time ago. Mr. Chair, normally our approach would be to take a look at the letter and talk about the content of the letter and respond to the letter if it just came to our minister, or sometimes letters have been received to both ministers, but quite often we would just discuss the content of the letter and the request that was being made or comments being made in the letter to our ministers. Thank you.
Thank you. So DFO claimed that the motion made before last Parliament, M91, in June of 2021, is a more complex matter than it likely appears on the surface. So what could be so complicated about shifting fiduciary arrangements? What's so complicated about shifting that from DFO to Global Affairs?
Mr. Chair, I think what the issue is, I think if that was Department of Fisheries and Oceans' response, they're probably best to explain the rationale behind it. I think what I can say is really to repeat my earlier comments that echo the comments from Mr. O'Day last week before this committee, that as officials, we're very pragmatic and practical as to where the machinery of governance lies on this issue. It's just that the decision is not with any of our departments to take.
Thank you. So, Global Affairs administers various funds for various initiatives, Campobello, IJC, International Boundaries Commission. Does GAC ever arbitrarily withhold funds from these initiatives?
And Mr. Chair, if I could clarify, so the funds for the International Joint Commission and the Roosevelt Campobello International Park are appropriated to Global Affairs and then transferred to the various bodies. We do not hold back monies. Funds for the International Boundary Commission were appropriated to National Resources Canada. So it was National Resources Canada that managed the Treasury Board submission process to secure funds.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Cronin, on this same topic here, Does Global Affairs ever act as the banker and also as the provider of services or for example, a subcontractor?
Mr. Chair, that's a difficult question for me to answer, just given the size and scope of the department. I think what I can say, certainly in the case of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, is that DFO speaks for Canada to the Commission. The Canadian commissioners are part of the Commission and speak as the Commission back to Canada. DFO, in its efforts to manage the relationship with the Commission, is certainly in touch with Global Affairs. It's the discussions Felicia and I mentioned earlier, to make sure that this relationship gets back on track. And I think what we were certainly encouraged by was the appearance last week and the good faith efforts that are being undertaken by all to make sure that relationship gets back on track.
Thank you, Mr. Small. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Initially, it looked like there was a confusion, if you like, at the DFO. Were they running a federal program with the Sea Lamprey initiative, or were they acting as a contractor to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission? What's your understanding?
So my understanding is that Department of Fisheries and Oceans speaks for Canada when engaging with the Commission. The Commission also has, or the DFO also has responsibility for delivering the Sea Lamprey Control Program, which is a key component of the Commission's work. But we also heard that the Commission does has a very important role in research as well, and I think that's something that we certainly support from Global Affairs and recognize the value of that role. I think when
I'll have to intercept there because I need some clarity here. So it seems that there's no clarity yet on whether or not they're a contractor or, in fact, they're running a government program. And processing the funding through the DFO's budget does put them in a bit of a tight spot because they have to somehow be accountable for that. Does this money have to go through the DFO? Or can it be channeled in another way so that the total sum intended for the Fisheries Commission actually gets to the Fisheries Commission, which then will allocate the amounts necessary to do the Sea Lamprey program?
So my understanding, Mr. Chair, is that the funding in Budget 2022 was allocated through the Treasury Board submission process to Department of Fisheries and Oceans for 5 years and ongoing. Under the convention, the Commission is to develop its budget, which includes activities for sea lamprey control, and then submit that budget to the contracting parties, so to Canada and the United States, for approval. And what we've seen from Global Affairs in our experience with other international or other bilateral institutions, rather, is that there are a number of discussions that take place throughout that process. So it's very, very clear what the budget request will be looking for, and that the governments will be in a position to approve that request.
That didn't really answer the question. I'm sorry, sir. So we're still in mystery here. Talk about fencing. We understand that the funding for the Fisheries Commission will be fenced in terms of protecting it from any future austerity programs or whatever. Is that the mechanism for ensuring that the appropriate amount gets to the Commission?
Certainly, and my understanding from last week's appearance by Department of Fisheries and Oceans officials is that discussions continue with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission Secretariat, and work is continuing on a memorandum of agreement that would lay out the process for how the funding will flow.
Okay, thank you for that. With respect to the conflict of interest, allegation here, would it be better if the DFO acted as a nominating body for that seat on the Fisheries Commission? So in other words, it isn't a DFO person sitting on the commission, but they nominate the person to go there. Would that make any difference at all in the issues surrounding conflict of interest?
Mr. Chair, again, it's difficult for me to speculate. I think what has been helpful with other commissions where government officials have had a seat on the commission or the institution is that it's very clear that they're there in the interest of the commission, that's their role, and that's explained to them. But then when they're interacting with government, it really depends on the context of the conversation.
Well, it would then appear that there is a conflict of interest, because if there's somebody from the DFO sitting on the Commission's board, their first responsibility is to the Government of Canada, not to the Commission. That would be expected of them. And finally...
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. There's only about 4 seconds left. The job to get a question out, let alone an answer. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please, or less.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Setting aside these mandates we're discussing, are there any others that were given to the Commission by GAC? So aside from the relationship you have with the Commission, do you have other mandates when it comes to fisheries at GAC?
J'essaie d'être clair.
I'm trying to be clear.
No, Mr. Chair, the question was clear. I'm thinking through, given the number of different divisions at Global Affairs, our role on fisheries issues. I could certainly take that back and confer with colleagues on the trade side of the department, who I do believe have a role. But I'm trying to think from our team if we have other interactions with bilateral organizations focused on fisheries, not regularly, but we certainly monitor, again, because of our interest in the general health of the relationship between Canada and the United States. So should issues related to fisheries arise, we would certainly be aware of those, be consulting with relevant departments to come to a response on behalf of Canada.
If, for instance, the U.S. were to pressure Canadian fisheries on the right whale or something else, do you have any power to intervene? Do you have any influence?
I think in that particular case, I would see a role for Department of Global Affairs, and we have played a role through our diplomatic network in the United States, including the embassy and our consuls general, again, to make clear to our American counterparts Canada's position on an issue and the reasons behind our position, to help explain to the Americans why we're proceeding in such a course of action.
Thank you, Madame Debienne. Your time is 2 seconds, but we'll call that up now. We'll go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Cronin, I'm trying to understand. I know that you have reiterated today that you can't speculate on, things that are not currently in place. However, there's clearly been a push to move the governance structure from that of working through DFO to Global Affairs. Can you clarify, has there been any discussion around what that might look like, around the effectiveness of Global Affairs taking this on, and any thoughts or challenges around what that might look like?
I believe when this issue first came up in 2020, the issue's been around for longer than that, but I do understand that there was some analysis done in 2021 on the implications. of a move. I think, like I said earlier, there are pros and cons, and as officials, we work with the structures that are in place. I think there is a good faith effort underway by officials from DFO and at the Great Lakes Fishery Commission to put the relationship back on track, to codify some of the roles and responsibilities. And I think that's what we're encouraged by at Global Affairs.
Thank you. And so to clarify through the chair, have you participated in any concrete discussions around what this transition might look like if it were to happen?
I have not, Mr. Chair.
And to clarify also, through the chair, Mr. Cronin, are you aware of any other parties having these discussions?
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Absolutely, the discussions continue across departments. But again, and I think as colleagues from Department of Fisheries and Oceans said at the last appearance, those decisions rest outside of an individual department. So that's why it's difficult for me to comment on the nature of them or who's involved, things like that.
Final question around, I'd like to ask Mr. Cronin through the chair, you started listing off various models that you've seen used. What would you recommend as a model in these circumstances?
I appreciate the question, Mr. Chair, but it's really not for me to make recommendations to the committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Epp for 5 minutes or less, please.
Mr. Perkins will start.
I'll just start and then I'll pass to
Oh,
Mr.
okay. I thought you wanted me to erase you on the sheet and not just
I know how much you would enjoy.
All right, you're up. Your 5 minutes are ticking.
I'll hand it over to Mr. Epp. I just have one question, and we don't often get Global Affairs officials before this committee. So recently, Global Affairs and DFO shut down bait masters using seal products as alternative lobster bait, while the U.S. is culling 9,000 sea lions in the Columbia River. So I just want to know why we would cave so quickly when the U.S. is actually more aggressive at dealing with their issues around seals and pinnipeds than we are.
Appreciate the question, Mr. Chair. I will have to take that back, as it is a subject the division doesn't deal with. I think what is always helpful when it comes to dealing with our American counterparts is being very clear with them the reasons we're taking the decisions we are and the benefits of that decision, not just on the Canadian side, but also to the American side. And that helps us make the case.
If they could provide it in writing, that would be great.
Thank you. You stated that you were engaged with Privy Council / PMO in 2021 around this whole issue. Were representatives physically in attendance at those meetings, and what form of a submission was that? Was that in the form of an analysis or an actual proposal for the transition of the machinery of government?
And actually, Mr. Chair, if I could just correct perhaps what I had said earlier, that we had engaged in some internal conversations within Global Affairs and analysis on what a change could look like. But the present state of conversation is now at the center.
My understanding it's been at the center for 9 months or so. Would that be accurate?
I would have to check our records. I'm honestly not sure.
If you could supply that to the committee, that would be appreciated. No one around this table is questioning. In fact, I've heard only positive of DFO's delivery of the sea lamprey program. However, there are two separate issues here before us, and it's the governance side. So you mentioned earlier that you were encouraged by the fact that the funding issues were sorted out for 2 years. Yet the 2022 budget was explicit in 5 years. Why do you think there's a discrepancy? Why is the DFO not committing for 5 years of transparent transference of the intended budget funds?
My understanding, Mr. Chair, is that those discussions are ongoing between DFO and the Commission, and that there's certainly a clear commitment from the Commission or from DFO as well as from the Commission to make sure that things get back on track, that things are clear, that we have the assured funding. We can assure our American friends that Canada continues to live up to its commitments under the 1954 Convention.
Thank you. That's exactly where I want to go next. There are discussions around an MOA, Memorandum of Understanding, on how we should operate. Global Affairs manages the relationship with the Campobello. I can always think Portobello, but it's Campobello Park, as well as the IJC. Do you need a memorandum in that relationship?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We do not have a memorandum of agreement with those organizations between ourselves and between GAC and those organizations. I do understand that other departments have with the IJC. I believe Environment and Climate Change Canada has an MOU with the IJC. I think what we do have with those organizations is, an understanding of the process based on the conventions that govern these organizations. And I think what I certainly heard from colleagues at DFO is, yes, there are some issues that need to be addressed. No one's disputing that. But there are efforts underway to address those. And it sounds like a memorandum of agreement is one way to get there.
I understand why, if you've got other relationships other than the machinery of government transferring funds from the Treasury to the operations of a binational or multinational commission for anything, that you might need a memorandum of understanding or contract, because it's a contractual relationship to deliver sea lamprey control or science or other things. But on this, the argument is specifically around the machinery of government function. And I know of no other situation where the authority rests with a certain department where an MOA is needed to codify the relationship. I've seen the main estimates of the IJC. You're very transparent. One line that the funds are transferred. Why that is not the case with the DFO is what I think I and we fail to understand.
And Mr. Chair, if I could, I think we were very encouraged to hear from the CFO the other week that efforts are underway to make sure that there could be a reporting in the public accounts. And from Global Affairs, we would very much support that. It's helpful in our conversations with our American colleagues to demonstrate, again, that Canada is meeting its obligations under the 1950 War Convention.
Thank you, Mr. Ripp. We'll now go to Mr. Hanley for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you both for appearing today. I just wanted to point out the guiding principles of the GLFC are consensus, accountability, information sharing, and ecosystem-based management. And Global Affairs Canada says, we define, shape, and advance Canada's interests and values in a complex global environment. And I know, Mr. Cronin, you did mention in response to another question the importance of defending Canada's interests. That's at the heart of Global Affairs. You've referred a few times to ongoing conversations with DFO, and I'd like to get a better understanding of the formal relationship that you have with DFO. And I wondered if you could tell the committee to explain GAC's current role specifically with respect to GLFC, but also to the success of Canada's fisheries in general.
Okay, no, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the question. I think, again, I'm able to speak to the role of the Transboundary Affairs Division and our relationship with DFO and the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. The broader role of Global Affairs with respect to defending and promoting Canada's fishing industry, I really would refer to colleagues probably on the trade side of the department. When it comes to our relationship with Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as my colleague Felicia Minotti mentioned, when there are representations that come in related to the Great Lakes Fisheries Commissions, there's certainly a discussion between officials in my division and the officials within DFO responsible for the commission. There are regular check-ins, just for us to be updated on the progress of conversations. We also circle back with the Secretariat, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission Secretariat, to see how things are going. We check in with our colleagues at the U.S. Embassy and State Department, and our message really is that the Canada-U.S. relationship is strong. the GLFC is a valuable contributor to making sure that relationship stays strong, and we're very much encouraging the commissioners to get back at the table to meet. I think there's an opportunity there's 2 new commissioners who've been appointed on the U.S. side. There's really an opportunity now to get all the commissioners around the table, rowing in the same direction.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll just move on to another question, because I think again in your testimony today, you talked about successful bilateral transboundary agreements. Could you maybe just elaborate on that, or maybe give me an example of what you see as successful agreements?
Certainly, I think there are a number, and I think it speaks to the strength of the Canada-U.S. relationship and the foresight of Canadian decision makers back in the day to codify some of those relationships. So certainly, if we take the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909 as an example, that created the International Joint Commission to help Canada and the U.S. manage issues related to water quantity and water quality. Certainly that treaty and the Commission has served Canadian interests very, very well, creating a space for Canada and the U.S. to have very frank conversations around water issues. So I would point to that. I think there are a number of organizations or bilateral institutions managed by colleagues at Department of Fisheries and Oceans related to fisheries management and protection. And I think those have also served Canada very well.
I'm going to jump in, and I have a minute left. I'm going to let Mr. Hardy finish his question from the previous round. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Handley. Is money the only issue here? Are there other issues that, again, the Fisheries Commission is struggling with in its relationship with the DFO or with Canada?
Mr. Chair, I think that's probably a question better answered by either officials from DFO or the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. I think what I could
that's good enough. I'll sneak one more in here. Are there other bilateral commissions or agencies that are also in stress, having difficulties getting Canada and the U.S. working, rowing in the same direction?
I mean, of the examples that I have provided before related to International Joint Commission, Roosevelt Campobello Park, or International Boundary Commission, we don't have the same questions around governance. I think if I can be frank, we have had questions from the International Joint Commission, both on the Canadian side and the American side, about when we should be leveraging the Commission or not. And those are active questions. Those can be frank and difficult discussions with our American counterparts. And so I certainly don't want to paint a picture that everything is rosy, but certainly if you look at the strength of the Canada-U.S. relationship at this moment in time, it's very, very strong.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy, and that concludes our hour of testimony and questions for this particular session. I want to say thank you to Mr. Cronin and Ms. Minotti for being here today and answering questions and providing us with their knowledge on this particular topic. So we'll suspend now to go in camera to do some committee business for the next hour.